Morning, everyone. We're just going to wait a few minutes for a few more people to log in. So if you could bear with us. I've been told we're expecting about 125 people today. So obviously fines are topical at the moment. Okay. A few more minutes, Carly, or should we start?
I'd go. Go.
Okay. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the AFP's webinar on fines management. My name is Julie Summerell. I'm a director of the AFP. I'd like to begin by inviting our panel to introduce themselves, starting with you, Shona.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Shona Harper. I work at Safo UK. I'm the general manager of our operations area, so covers fines and fleet management. I've been in the industry probably don't want to really say, but 20 plus years. And I've been involved in lots of different roles, but my main function is to support the operational activity on fines and fleet. So I've got quite a lot of background in this very subject. I've worked at Safo now for the last 5 years. So welcome, everybody.
Thanks very much, Safo. Chris, next. Sorry.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Chris Beaumont. I've been in the industry about 19 years, the last 10 of which are with Ayvens, formerly known as LeasePlan. I am currently an account director in our strategic partnerships team. And I can see there's a few of our customers on here today. So hello and welcome to anybody who does know me.
Okay, and Yvonne?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Yvonne Cannon, and I'm the fleet manager for SMS Energy, which was formerly SMS PLC. I'm the baby compared to the previous two speakers. I've been here 10 years, and I manage the fleet. It's grown from a fleet of 95 to up to 600 vehicles, and we work a lot in London and Edinburgh and have a lot of fines that come through on our day-to-day basis.
All right, that's brilliant. Unfortunately, Martin Putt from Bauer Media Outdoor is unable to join us this morning for personal reasons. But before we start, just a reminder that the webinar will be recorded and obviously accessible via the AFP website. So in way of introduction, I'd like to just share some facts with you. No surprise, fines have increased dramatically over the last 2 years. Parking fines remain the most common, accounting for 52% of all fines across fleet. Congestion charge fines have increased from 4 to 6% of all fines, and obviously the rollout of clean air zones to more and more cities will involve more charges. The figures from the RAC suggest that private parking fines are on course to issue, firms are on course to issue a record 14.5 million tickets to drivers in a year. And this is just with 5 companies. So that's, 5 companies responsible for half. Also, interestingly, a request to the DVLA from car park management companies for vehicle keeper details hit 7.2 million in the first half of the last financial year. This is an equivalent of 41,000 a day and a 12% increase on the same period 12 months before, which was 6.5 million. It's therefore essential that fleet decision makers employ a robust fines management process, with UK drivers facing record numbers of fines and penalties. I'd now like to hand over to Shona from Safo.
Hi, good morning, everyone. So, as you know, we're all here to talk about fines management. It's a big topic to cover. Hopefully, from all of us today, you'll find the information useful. We know it's a challenging landscape. It's always changing, always something new. So hopefully, you'll get some useful information, or at least we're all a bigger group now that we can support each other through this complex landscape. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what we do today at Safo, but very briefly, I'm not doing a sales pitch here. I'm just talking to you about what we have found in terms of managing fines for our clients across the UK and in our EU countries that we're in. Changes in fines management during 2025 and sort of the level of volumes we're seeing in fines today. Just a little bit about Safo, I suppose, and what we do. So across our different countries that we're in, we manage over 6 million fines a year. In the UK alone, last year we managed over 2.5 million. So you can see the chunk of fines that we're looking after and the detail in that. We're trying to, I suppose, one of our key focuses, and I'll touch a bit later, is about electronic fines. So we need to get rid of this paper coming through the door. It's not good for the climate and things like that in terms of the authorities, the delays in post getting to us. So I'll talk a little bit about that in terms of what's out there in the market today in terms of helping people get electronic fines. So if we just move on to the next slide, that would be great. So in terms of, I suppose, the process, this is just to give you an overall view of, what you need in terms of managing a fine. I suppose the key things I would say is, vehicle data is key. So make sure your vehicles are registered correctly. Make sure that any vehicles that have been registered to you incorrectly by dealers and things like that are taken out of your name as soon as possible, because as soon as that vehicle gets on the road, those fines will be coming to your door. So that they're real key things. Obviously extracting key data from the fine itself to make sure that you're managing that fine correctly for your drivers or your customers, and tracking, I suppose, tracking where that vehicle is. So where is that vehicle at any one time? Is it been moved to a garage by somebody else? Is it been collected for disposal? So, all those key moments across the life cycle of a vehicle are really key to capture, to make sure that you're letting the authorities know the correct driver details or customer details of that vehicle at that time. So, we receive fines in many different ways. So either from directly from our customers that have received it, we obviously receive paper directly into us, or we receive them digitally through our solution, and that's either connected directly to authorities who give us that electronic data along as the image of the fines, or we connect to third parties who issue fines on behalf of authorities today. So these come in, we capture all the data, we have customer data, driver data, and consolidate that all into effectively a rules engine to work out, based on legislation and logic, how to manage that fine, how best to process that fine today. And then based on our customer rules, what do they want to do with that fine? Do you want to pay it because it's a problem authority that won't accept anything else, because potentially lease codes or fleet managers can't provide the right details to tick that box in legislation? Is it you want to transfer liability to take the onus away from yourself, which I would say majority of people would want to do that, to get that out of your name and address and pass it to the person that actually does need to have it in terms of them appealing? Do we forward it directly to that person to give them an opportunity to do something with that fine? Does it need appealing already? We already know potentially it needs appealing because it's potentially an escalation that's arrived, that you haven't seen sight of the first fine in the first place. And then it's all about obviously making sure, our customers in particular get provided the charges of the fines that we paid, so they can on-bill their customers. So I suppose the key to take away from this is really keeping accurate records of your drivers is key. Where that vehicle is at what time, to make sure you can match it against the fine that comes in. I suppose another thing is, communication is key to your drivers or customers to make sure that they know that it's been received and you've acted on that fine. So one of the key things obviously we do as part of our process for our customers is communicate to their customers or drivers to let them know a fine has been either paid or transferred to the authority, so they're aware of it. So I suppose let me talk a little bit about electronic fines. So we've been working, I don't know, it feels like years and years to try and get authorities to come to us to manage fines electronically. I'd say in the last 12 months, we have managed to bring on board quite a considerable number of private operators today, which is absolutely great news, because actually that opens up a whole different landscape in terms of being able to transfer liability fines without necessarily ticking those boxes for the leasing companies who can't necessarily provide all the documents under the legislation. So, and then I think the press recently, there's been lots of talk about trying to move away from electronic fines, paper fines, in terms of getting those through the door. So I think more and more private operators, particularly all these or councils, they're trying to look at ways to save money. By saving money, they can connect electronically, either to yourselves through your own means, or through suppliers that can do that for you in terms of receiving those fines. So we've definitely seen an increase in private operators taking an interest in electronic fines, which means you can get it out of your name quicker. They come in quicker, they're processed quicker, and then you can get the transfer liability processed quicker as well. So comes out of your name, meaning no escalations and no impact to your drivers or customers. So we also, I suppose, just respond to authorities in different ways. I mean, you will probably find that yourselves. We email authorities, we send still letters. You wouldn't believe still the letters we have to send today, particularly for speeding offences. They still won't accept anything by letter that you have to physically sign the document before you send it back, or obviously by electronic. In Italy, I'd say our percentage of electronic fines is about 70+%. And the actual response back to the authority is tracked via what's called a certified email. I'd like to get something like that in the UK, where actually that authority has got that email and is acting on that transfer liability, and it's proof that they've received it. So rather than today, we have raw mail, don't we, where we're sending things in the post, and actually I think the percentage I read on Royal Mail was something like they only actually get maximum 80% to its destination. It's probably even less than that, actually. But today in the countries we look at, obviously UK has risen. I think early last year it was sort of 25%. So you can see the increase we've had throughout last year and early this year. France is growing, so that's now 50% and getting higher. They're pushing for electronic method of communication. Obviously Italy is 78%. Germany only 10% at the moment, but I know we're having a meeting with the government and the authorities early next year. There's been a meeting arranged to try and push that forward for Germany. You'd think Germany would be ahead of the game really a little bit, wouldn't you? So we got a meeting obviously with that, but just as I suppose a capture on electronic fines, what that means is anybody that we connect to electronically doesn't go to the DVLA to get the keeper details for our customers. They effectively ask us if it's one of our vehicles. We say yes. If it is, we then tell them who the name and address of the keeper is of that vehicle. So they effectively they're saving money by not having people managing fines their end as well. They're saving money by not paying the DVLA. So that's one of the reasons why we're obviously pushing that as well. And then if we move sort of on to the next one. So this is just a bit of a snapshot of volumes of fines in the UK in 2024. obviously there's been lots of press about private operators recently, private parking fines, and obviously the volume of those are, exceeds sort of 14 million fines, which is absolutely crazy. And in the stats we look after our customers, private operators speeding are definitely congestion, would you believe, and actually now Silvertown and Blackwall Tunnel in London, actually that's now become one of our top 3 paying fines, which was only introduced this year. So that's now one of our highest volumes of fines. People are getting used to that being there, but nonetheless, congestion's been out for a very, very long time, and people still find that confusing. Dartford Crossing as well. But in terms of, I suppose, private operators is a big one. Speeding is definitely the next highest, and then obviously Transport for London fines across the board exceeded over 8.3 million across all the different types of fines that they issue in London, which is a bit scary, really. And then in terms of then private fines, obviously are the highest. It's, and I think what to say about private parking fines, obviously it's complex. I mean, everyone on this webinar today probably understands how complex private fines are. There's legislation in place that is POFA, which is very complex to navigate. There's a new parking code of practice being introduced, or is with the government at the moment under a consultation, which I would say to everybody, please get on there and provide your feedback on private fines back to the government, because it's open between now and September. So please do that. And I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit later in lots of other discussions and Q&As. Obviously today, AI technology as well is playing a key role in issuing fines. So I think across Devon, Cornwall, Greater Manchester, they've now introduced two-way cameras. And what those two-way cameras do, they don't just look at the lane that you're in, they look at multiple lanes. So it's not only looking at the way if you're going forward or going the other way, they're looking at both lanes, plus looking inside your vehicle. So they can see whether you're holding your phone in your hand, or you've picked up something, or you're not wearing your seatbelt. So I think it's only a matter of time once that's relayed across the UK that we're going to see more and more fines being issued. There was talks about putting those types of cameras on traffic lights. So if you're at your traffic lights and you're tempted to pick up your phone, they will capture you doing it. So obviously there's a cost involved in that, and there's time, but it's starting to get more and more, and we are seeing fines issued around seatbelts, and particularly through these types of cameras. So obviously AI technology and technology in general is one to watch. And I suppose just to touch on here, so these are Safo's top authorities. So you can see in that list, there's 12 out of those 20 authorities are private operators. So you can see in terms of us managing those fines, and anywhere, they're big. So congestion charging obviously still up there. Speeding, Met Police is one of the biggest, obviously, in terms of national NIPs that are being issued, and even Holton Borough Council, things like that for Dartford Crossing, they're still big issue of fines. That was just to give you a bit of a flavour of what we're seeing in terms of, so 12 out of 20 are private operators today in the fines that we manage. A little bit about, I suppose, outside the UK, a little bit of a touch on that. So in terms of the French market today, they're looking at increasing their charges for fines. They want to make some more money. We're doing the same in the UK. Fines are increasing, particularly in London. They're differentiating between vehicle weight and type, and obviously electric vehicles across UK are now starting to get fined by the end of this year for congestion that are being introduced in December. So it's only a matter of time before they're looking at all these different ways to try and capture the vehicles on the roads. And in terms of the UK, I suppose it's councils. We know the situation some of our councils are in. They're not in a good place financially, so they need to recover money from somewhere. And I think the roads and cars on the roads is one of those key moments. Germany, the same. It's complex. It's all paper based. you know, there's you can't bulk pay things. You have to pay individually for each fine is received. So for us, it's quite challenging in terms of managing that piece. They don't always put the number plate or the time of offence in any of their communication. So it's a repeat trying to pick up a piece of paper and manage it. And private authorities, basically in Germany, tend to not respond to any communications that you send. So obviously that's challenging for customers trying to manage those fines. Coming already in play in terms of the EU directive. So now from May 25, they have opened up the fact that under Brexit, it all sort of went away. Actually now cross-border fines can now be issued to UK vehicles travelling abroad. So they've reset the enabler for those countries to be able to get data and register keeper details from the DVLA. So I think they've got till mid 2027 to be able to put the legislation officially in each of those countries back in place. And from that point, I mean, I think we've started seeing some foreign fines already coming in for UK vehicles. So I think it's only a matter of time before that starts to increase. We used to see a lot before Brexit. I think that's just going to grow, basically, so they can recover those costs. And likewise, UK fines for foreign drivers. The authorities in the UK want to obviously pursue and try and get their money for fines that they're getting, particularly rental companies wanting to get their money back for fines they're having to pay and settle. And I suppose my last few points are around some of the changes that have happened in the last sort of 6 to 12 months. So Blackwall Tunnel, in case people don't know, but Blackwall and Silvertown Tunnel, that went live. That's now our third highest fine type to pay across all the fines that we manage. So you can see the impact of that. It's managed in the same way congestion is, which means you have to pay it. There is no try and transfer it. You can if you're rental companies, but anybody with a longer term lease or a vehicle on long-term contract with their driver or customer is over 6 months have to pay it. The new statutory code of practice, I mentioned that earlier, but we'll probably talk about that a bit later. That's coming in. Glasgow City Council, they are enforcement pavement parking. That came in March 25. So that will just naturally, I'm sure, come across the UK. And once you start seeing somewhere, you start seeing it everywhere else. Congestion charge, that's increasing in January 2026. For the daily charge from £15 to £18, and obviously the change in electric vehicles will start to pay the congestion charge from December 2025, as well as already this year. Obviously, electric vehicles picked up road fund licence costs, which they weren't expecting as well this year. Dark charge, I've seen some information about potential price increase in September. Waiting for a bit more information on that to find out what that's going to look like. And then London penalty charge costs, they've already increased, so they've already gone up. There wasn't much announcement about it, but they've actually increased all the costs in terms of charging you if you don't pay within certain periods for different areas within London. And I suppose my final piece, Royal Mail, I don't know if anybody's seen in the press recently, but in Royal Mail they have said that they will no longer deliver second class post on a Saturday, and they will no longer deliver it Monday to Friday. It'll be alternate working days. So in terms of, you can imagine fines today is being issued out from authority, goes to the registered keeper. You've got, particularly private operators, you've got 14 days in which to act on something. That fine is likely to be already nearing its 14-day window before it even reaches where it needs to get to. So I think, that Royal Mail piece, and something I wanted to take away with the British Vehicle Rental Leasing Association to see what we can do about trying to arrange a meeting to discuss those changes and the impact with authorities, to see what they are going to do to allow some dispensation perhaps in the future around some of that. But that's coming in end of July, so that's not far away. So we'll wait to see what the impact of that is. So the more you do electronically, obviously the better you get, because you're not going to have to receive those pieces of paper. So that is my sort of summary on fines. So thank you very much for listening. I believe I now hand you over to Chris. Is that right, Julie?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And it's a good lead into Chris's presentation, because Safo look after Ayvens fines.
Yes. I'll test
Yes,
Chris now, so he knows it.
Yeah, so we work alongside Safo, and I'm here to kind of give the leasing company perspective and talk about how we work with our customers on fines management. At Ayvens, we work with a range of customer fleet sizes in both public and private sectors, including some of the UK's largest and most complex fleets. So we know that fines and the costs incurred by them can quickly spiral if you don't have the right processes and policies in place. And it's not just about paying those fines, it's understanding why they've happened and how can we prevent them. Because although fines can be a challenge, if you've got the right systems in place and the right approach, they can become a driver for improving your overall fleet performance. And if you could move the slide on for me, please. Thank you. So this is a snapshot of the most common fines that we see at Ayvens. It is by no means an exhaustive list. I split them into endorsable and non-endorsable. So just to clarify that for everybody, an endorsable fine is one where points can be put onto your license. So such as a speeding offence, whereas a non-endorsable fine, so something like a parking ticket, you'll get the fine, but that cannot add points to your license. And that's important to note when you're working with a leasing company and you're deciding whether you want them to pay and recharge a fine on your behalf, or to nominate the driver, which I'll come on to a bit later. But essentially, the leasing company can pay and recharge a non-endorsable fine, but not an endorsable fine. We see three main types of fines coming through for our customers. First of these is a fixed penalty notice, so an FPN. These are issued by the police or a local council or the DVSA. You get 28 days to pay an FPN. If not, you will then have to pay 50% of the original fine value. And if you don't pay that, you can be prosecuted, which can lead to a bigger fine as well as court costs. We also see PCN, so penalty charge notices. These are legally enforceable under the Traffic Management Act of 2004, which gave councils the power to issue and collect these fines. If you receive a PCN, you are legally required to either pay that fine or challenge it within a specified time frame. The most common are parking fines, but you can get them also for traffic rules, so going down a road with a no right turn, or driving in a bus lane, not paying a congestion zone, or a toll charge. This will all lead to a PCN. And similarly, you get 28 days to pay your PCN. If you don't do that, you will then get a charge certificate, which will give you 14 days to pay the original fine, and again another 50% on top. And if you don't pay that, you'll get a court order demanding payment. And the third one we see is the notice to owner, so an NTO. The difference between an NTO and the PCN is that the PCN is either handed to the driver or placed on the windscreen of a vehicle, so it's there at the time, whereas an NTO is issued from the local authority to the owner of the vehicle. Now, if you get a PCN and you don't pay or challenge that in the 28 days, an NTO will also be issued. But it's keen to understand the difference here, because if a PCN is not issued at the time, the driver may not be expecting a charge, but the NTO will be issued to the leasing company, who may then pay that on behalf of the driver. And so the first the driver and the customer will be aware of is when that fine has come through, rather than at the time of the offence. And just as an indication, at Ayvens, we manage around 1,100 NTOs a month. If you could move on for me, please. So thank you. So this is the Ayvens numbers, which mirrors some of the data that Shona brought up just now, but it shows the year-on-year increase we're seeing in not just the number of fines, but also the original cost of those fines going up as well. So it's having a really significant impact on fleets and their operating costs. And you can see with that year-on-year increase, although obviously it dipped through lockdown, as a lot of things did, we're already above the pre-COVID numbers. The next slide shows, again, some of the stats that Shona showed, but again for Ayvens, and it's no surprise, parking fines are by far and away the most common. And as Shona's talking about the consultation, there's been a lot in the press over the last 6 to 12 months about regulation in the industry, but that's not come to fruition yet. So I would echo Shona's comments about getting involved in that consultation and giving your feedback as soon as you can, so we can all build into that. the stats in the press yesterday said that there were 14.4 million parking tickets issued last year, a 13% increase year on year. But the really staggering number for me is the first quarter of this year, there's over 39,000 parking fines issued every day, and parking fines are avoidable. And as you can see in the table, after parking, the most common are traffic offences. And for a fleet, that's really important because that has an impact on the safety of your fleet and the drivers that are driving your company vehicles. The second snapshot is just around the authorities. So kind of at Ayvens, again, that mirrors what Safo see. Of the 5 top authorities that issue fines to us, 4 of them are private parking companies. So companies like Parking Eye or Euro Car Parks. And the non-parking one in there is the Dart charge. Now, the way we view this is, if we can move on to the next slide, please. It's important to view fines in a wider context. It's not just the cost. Investigating the fines may indicate underlying issues that you need to address within your fleet. So, for instance, if you see a driver is receiving multiple traffic offences, such as speeding, it may be a safety issue, and you might need to put some driver training in to reduce the risk on your fleet and improve the safety. If you're seeing a rise in clean air zone charges, this may be an indication that the makeup of your fleet and the location it's operating in isn't suitable. And maybe you need to review that and look into where you can put down electric vehicles in certain locations to avoid these charges. And also, if you're operating vans and you have livery on them, be aware of the potential reputational damage if you're continuing to pick up fines in those areas which vehicles shouldn't be. Offences such as bus lanes and box junctions can be indication of poor planning from the drivers. So again, that might help you identify training gaps within your driver population. But by looking at the causes of fines and not just the fine itself, you can improve the safety across your fleet, reduce that operational risk, and cut costs as well. So the most important thing and the key to managing fines effectively is having a robust policy in place, to which there are 5 key points. So the first is deciding how you're going to process those fines. Do you manage them internally, or do you utilise your leasing company? If you manage them internally, you need to be aware of the huge amount of administration work that's involved in that, and also assess the speed at which you can manage the process, because any delays in that can be crucial, not just in terms of costs going up, but also impacts your drivers, such as on their license. So the majority of our customers utilise us to manage the process for them, and that ensures the speed of the management, but also allows them to utilise the time this frees up to investigate the causes of the fines rather than just managing the payment of them. The second is to decide whether you want the leasing company to pay and recharge these on your behalf or to nominate the driver. So as I mentioned, the leasing company can pay a non-endorsable fine up front and then recharge the cost to you. Or you can ask them for those non-endorsable fines to send the driver details to the issuing authority, and they will then reissue the fine directly to the driver, which will start that period of 28 days from the point they reissue. There are pros and cons to these options. If you choose to pay and recharge, it means that it is settled and the cost isn't going to go up. It does still allow the driver to challenge the fine if they think it's incorrect, and your leasing company can provide you with a letter allowing them to do so. However, what we are seeing is a big increase in the number of private parking companies that do not allow a driver to challenge a fine if it has already been settled. So I had an example of this recently where one of our drivers went to pay for a private parking through the app. They selected the right location and the right time. They had a valid ticket for whilst they were there with the right duration, but they incorrectly selected their wife's registration on the app rather than their own car. And then when they tried to go and challenge us with the authority, they didn't want to entertain it. As far as they were concerned, it was paid and the case was closed. If you choose to nominate the fine back to the driver, this requires the personal data to be up to date and shared with your leasing company. So not just the home address that the vehicle is delivered to. So if your driver moves house within the lease period and the contract they've taken the vehicle of, the leasing company needs to be aware, because otherwise the fine could get reissued to the previous address, which may mean that the cost has gone up for a late payment before the driver has even seen the fine. Also consider about how you recover the costs of the fines from your drivers. So what does your driver policy state, and have the drivers signed up and agreed to it? So for a lot of our customers, we're able to load their policy to our portal, and it acts as a terms and conditions document. So the driver will have to sign and say that they've read and agreed the policy before they can place an order. So I'd recommend check if your leasing company can support you from that point of view. Also look at repeat offenders. So if similar fines are being incurred by a driver or drivers, it can be an indication of education and driver training being required. To analyze this, you need good data. If you're managing fines yourself, have a think about whether you can keep this data and in a format that allows you to analyze it effectively. If you're utilizing a leasing company, then use their reporting to track the driver behavior and identify your repeat offenders. Alongside this, you also need a robust process in place for license checking, so you're aware of points being added to a driver's license and their suitability and legality to drive a company vehicle. We have seen examples in the past where drivers have been disqualified, they haven't informed their employer, so they weren't aware, and because they weren't checking the licenses in a robust and regular manner, that driver was able to continue driving for business despite the fact that they were disqualified. And also look at repeat offenders in terms of other costs as well, because fines could be an indicator that those drivers are incurring other costs in other areas of your fleet. So our data shows that where drivers have multiple fines, it's an indicator of their wider behaviour. So speak to your leasing company and see if you can access this kind of data to manage the risk to your company. At Ayvens, we take a risk-aware approach. So we look at the fines, but alongside other factors such as license points, driver behaviour through telematics, high mileage drivers, tyres being changed at illegal levels, fuel costs, accident data and repair costs, and also end of contract damage costs. Because what we see is all of these costs combine, and then what you see is they drive up your insurance premiums. So at Ayvens, we now offer our own insurance for fleet cover, and so we're working with customers to drive down the costs in these areas and drive down the risk so that they can then reduce their insurance premiums. And I'm sure you've all seen the cost of your insurance rise over the last few years. So controlling these costs is key to reducing your overall fleet costs wherever you can. And as with all of these things, fines are similar to everything. It's all about the data and the quality of the data. So the more good data you can access, the better decisions you can make, and the better equipped you are to control and manage the costs around the total cost of the operation on your fleet. Thank you very much.
That's great, Chris. Last but not least, over to you, Yvonne.
Good morning, everybody. Well, that's a lot of information to absorb. So in my area, I primarily run a commercial fleet, primarily doing jobs and fitting smart meters. So we are doing a lot of work in London, Edinburgh, London being the particular challenge at the moment because we have, there's parking permits, residential parking permits. Residents will say, yeah, we'll give you a permit, but that doesn't work. And that is our biggest challenge at the moment, because for us to go and do a job, it has its costs. If we abort the job, we have our costs. So sometimes we just risk doing the job and just paying the fine of £80. Not ideal. And we're looking at ways of trying to speak to the various councils to see what they can do to help us. And I'd be very interested to see if anybody on this call have the same challenges. The private parking company fines, like as our previous speakers have said, they're mainly private parking companies. In the main, I couldn't manage this. We manage it all in-house without a proper vehicle management system. And we use the telematics, we log all our fines, and we use all that data, as Chris mentioned, to highlight other behavioural issues among drivers. The lack of a national parking app is our challenge as well. No unified parking app exists. We have reduced our costs by providing access to apps like Ringo, Pay by Phone, MI Permit, and we've given the drivers access to this now. That's only as good as the team here are managing the system and checking that when we have drivers who leave, that we remove them from the system, we add vehicles to the system, the same with the congestion zone, and we manage it all through a vehicle management system. So a national unified parking app would be just the ideal, but I think that's a long way off. We use a credit card a lot to pay. That brings with it its risks. Example, Glasgow City Council recently have had their parking portal was hacked and suspended all online payments. Are we also exposed if we use our credit cards? The prepayment systems, pay by phone now, are with Corpay, and that has been a game changer for us. And we have reduced our fines by putting these guys on all these apps at the moment. It is a big cost, but it's a lot smaller than the cost we'd incur in the parking fines, you know. The drivers who, as I've said, who've refused to claim back, or if they did claim back, is admin heavy as well. And that's another reason why we put them on the apps. I recommend to anybody working a commercial fleet, if you have the resources to do it, to set up the company vehicles on the various toll providers, because that has seen us reduce our costs by a significant amount. But in saying that, our costs on a yearly basis are running at about £250,000. And that's all I've got to say really today, unless anybody's got any questions.
That's fabulous. Thanks, Yvonne. Yes, let's move on to questions now. Carly, have we got one?
Yeah, we've got a couple in the chat. Gary Dawson said he's also seen an increase in the refusal of the appeal on the paid basis in the last few months. Is that even legal, given the driver who actually committed the parking offence hasn't been able to appeal?
Yeah, I mean, I could probably answer part of that. I think that's to do with the fact that there's no effectively governance on some of the private operators. You've got a split between the British Parking Association members, so the big players like Parking Eye, UKPC, they're big players and generally would allow that appeal to happen after you've paid it. The other IPC members, and generally I would say are more problematic, would basically, if once they've got their money, they're just not interested. And due to the fact that, I think within the code of practice, there's some very clear guidance on the fact that they do need to allow an appeal. They do allow it, but it has to be extenuating circumstances. But I'd say it's very rare that they would actually refund that money once it's been paid for those particular problematic private operators, whereas the other ones will allow you to appeal even after payment. It's just, that's why it's complex, because there's no BPA follow a guidance. They also have an agreement with the British Vehicle Rental Leasing Association under a memorandum of understanding to say they will try and contact, if you transfer liability, they would try and contact that driver or that customer a number of times before then seeking the registered keeper of the vehicle for keeper liability. So leasing companies today, under the legislation of POFA, there's keeper liability that came in play, which means that the keeper is held accountable for those fines if the driver does not appeal or pay it. So that's why it's quite a challenging landscape. Hopefully, if we all respond to this code of practice, we can try and push that they should allow fair challenges to those payments if a fine has been paid by a lease co or registered keeper.
Yeah, I think all I'd add to that is that's why this consultation at the moment is key. The more we can all feed back into that, the more we can have an influence on it. Because one of the things they're talking about is having an independent appeals panel above the issuing authority. So if you get refused, you might still have somewhere else you can go to. So the more we can add into that and get something out of the consultation is key, I think.
Yeah, I've put a link to the consultation in the chat as well, and I'll share it on LinkedIn and add it in the members area after. But yeah, Gary is saying that he is getting this from the big players too. So yeah.
That's surprising.
Melissa has said, this is probably one for you, Chris. How is GDPR managed when leasing company is nominating the driver?
So I'm by no means a GDPR expert, but you're allowed to use the data for a specific purpose. So because this is managing a fine issued to the driver who's been driving that vehicle, there isn't a GDPR breach in terms of sharing that data. Now, it's the data that the customer is happy to share with us, though. So we do have some customers that don't want a home address stored on the system. So they might use the company's address, but have that fine issued to the driver at their address. That has become more problematic with more home working on hybrid working that we're seeing. But it comes down to the data that you want to share with the leasing company, but they then can use that to get the fine reissued to a driver.
Well, thank you. Michael has said, is there any information on utility companies being able to contest parking fines? We successfully contest some fines if we can prove we're in the area for legitimate work reasons, with varying success dependent on the issuing authority.
I think we're a utility company as well, Michael, and we find it the same. If we can prove that we were there, it depends on the work. If we are making a profit from that job, we won't be successful. If it was emergency work, sort of vulnerable people or need to put somebody back on gas, well then yes, but we would need every piece of documentation available and redact any obviously customer information. So it's very difficult and it's very admin heavy. And we have found that the burden in some cases is actually quicker just to pay than actually contest some of them, to be fair. It's not worth it in some days to actually pull all that information, obviously with GDPR as well for our customers. So we're the same. We're finding it challenging as well.
Thank you.
I'm just responding to sort of Gary's question on, obviously he's getting fines from some of the bigger players. There's if you go on the British Parking Association website, and I'll put the link on here in a minute, you can, if there's a process you can review in terms of putting in a complaint or inquiry. In terms of, if you read that process in there, it will give you a guide of how to then go about appealing any private operators against that are members of the BPA. So they have got strict guidance, also raised with the BVLA as well. If you're a member of the British Vehicle Rental Leasing Association, raise it with them and complain about what experiences you're finding, because they have a good relationship with the BPA and the IPC, so that might help as well.
Thank you. Elaine has asked, if a fine is sent to a driver's home address, i.e. in the same way as an NIP, does that completely absolve the company?
In terms of recovering a cost, you mean?
I think, yeah, in terms
Or
of, is the company liable for the cost, or is it the driver directly?
So if you're utilising your leasing company and the fine has come through there, the cost would still sit with the customer. That's actually more about how the customer can recover the cost from their driver, which links back to the piece around the driver policy that I mentioned. Essentially, you're contracted with the leasing company, so that's where the cost would be taken from. It's about how you can recover that so that the company isn't penalised for the driver picking up a fine that they might have been able to avoid.
Thank you. I think that's it in terms of questions. There's lots of comments and people in a similar boat to you, Yvonne, but no additional questions as such.
I think in relation to, I know there was a question there about, when you're unionised, we are not, but we will in the main, validate, obviously have our very robust policies and processes and how we manage fines here. We always validate, obviously, the driver who is in the vehicle at the time, the date, location, because we can access the telematics. We do recover the costs. If we find that the driver was at fault, we will recover it and deduct it from payroll. And we do advise the driver and operations prior to that instruction going to payroll, but we will deduct straight away, when we have processed the fine and we validated it from the driver's pay the following month. That's how we manage it.
We have another one. Thank you, Yvonne. Is there any other way to deal with overstay fines that were rejected? In most cases, we had 2 deliveries the same day, but are fined as overstay. And when appealed, some come back rejected.
That's a tricky one.
It is, yeah, it is. We have the same. In the main, any of our overstays are rejected.
Mm.
If we haven't paid for parking, no amount of extenuating circumstances will get that overturned. I've tried it on several. So we do a large job, say we do large so hospitals or whatever. Even submitting the job card, we struggle.
I think the same, isn't it? It's for you as an individual. If you're going into a Tesco car park and you've been in once, and sometime, or Sainsbury's or Asda, or when any of those to do your shopping, and you come back out and then maybe have to go back in later sometime, they do issue fines according to that as well, and it's very difficult to challenge those, unfortunately, unless you go straight into complain directly to Tesco's or to Asda's. Hopefully the code of practice, if that goes into fruition, would help some of these things in terms of being able to appeal and challenge, I think, because there'll be some clear governance, there'll be an appeals body that would help some of this that is going on in the industry.
I think I was just looking at something. I think the biggest problem for appealing fines is actually the communication with the fine companies. You have it's all one way. It's like there's nothing coming back. There's no acknowledgement, nothing. You have to screenshot everything when you submit in the main. So it is very difficult to appeal.
Okay, guys, we'll close the Q&A session now. Any that we haven't managed to cover, we'll obviously answer and upload onto the website, won't we, Carly?
Yeah.
Okay, I think my biggest takeaway is the Parking Act, and I think if we did all register our concerns online, I think the 3 things that I've seen is there's going to be a standard appeals process, which would save a lot of time and effort. There's going to be a cap on charges and clearer signage rules, and importantly, a single independent appeals body. So, from my perspective, that's obviously going to save us all a great deal of time and money. Okay, just before we close, I'd like to just give you an update on events, up and coming events on the AFP. We've got the Expo on the 10th of September, which is at the British Motor Museum. That is an opportunity for suppliers and fleet managers to get together and to also, importantly, have some round tables for your involvement. We have Women in Voices afternoon tea on the 10th of September. The very popular Fleet Operator Online Forum on the 23rd of September. And one that I look forward to is the Fleet Operator Dinner at Hampton Manor on the 7th of October. Obviously, all the events are on the website, so please keep an eye on those. Just quick reminders, dashboards and commentary on the outcome of the fleet team benchmarking survey is live. The shared charging update is also on the website, and again, please register for the expo. And I think that's about it. Training, I beg your pardon. Lots going on in training. It's proven more and more popular over the last 12 to 18 months. Again, just, they're all listed there, but please book your course through the website as quickly as possible. In closing, I'd like to obviously thank the panel for your time this morning, and hope you've all found it as interesting as I have. And thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye.